Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss what we may have learned from the trade agreement between Singapore and the EU, and if there are any lessons in it or any scope in it whatsoever for a post-Brexit relationship between the UK and the EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified daily of news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, for all the talk of Norway deals that we had before the referendum, but now we totally don't want that. We never wanted that. That was absolutely ridiculous. Now it's moved on to Canada-style deals, with Boris Johnson using the term quite recently. But perhaps what he's really after is what you might call a Singapore-style deal, at least insofar as having a completely deregulated financial sector. Now, let's forget for one moment that Singapore's economy is actually pretty free of corruption and that they have a lot of social policies such as widespread affordable housing and serious environmental controls. Obviously, Boris Johnson doesn't want that. We'll focus instead on what it is about Singapore that appeals to the Conservatives. Low taxation, low regulation of the financial sector at any rate. Now, I saw a report from a business journalist a few months ago, I think it was now, and they were saying that they'd been talking to an EU official off the record, and what the EU most fears is having a Singapore right on their doorstep, that the UK diverges from the EU so much that it becomes a low tax, low regulation safe haven for big money of both fair and foul sources. And that, of course, would put pressure on their own financial sector, their own banks, to themselves put pressure on the EU to loosen their own regulations because it's making them uncompetitive. Now, the EU will, of course, want to avoid that scenario, just as Boris Johnson would gleefully would want to move towards it. And we in the UK, by the way, should not see ourselves as being on the side of the UK in this upcoming tussle. Brexit is going to happen now. Even those of us who do not want it to happen and who want to be part of the European community, want to be part of the EU, we have to accept that that's not going to happen now. And being a Briton, I now need the government to get the best possible deal they can for us. I know that's not going to happen, but I have to wish for it and I have to cheer them on because I'm relying on them to bat for us. And that means there's going to be various negotiations where I will need Britain to win. That's quite clear. But this is one where it hurts us all. You know, I absolutely don't want Boris Johnson to win through with a situation that means lower taxes and lower regulation of the financial sector, because it does nothing for us. It actually hurts ordinary people. You know, we should know this from the global crash that happened just over 10 years ago. If people are thinking otherwise, how short are your memories? Boris Johnson achieving this outcome will absolutely see lots of money flooding into London. He'll say, oh, look at all this inward investment. And, you know, as it does now, perhaps even more so. But it doesn't benefit us in any way. Doesn't even benefit the people of London. It's harmful because attracting such money through specifically lower taxation and regulation means you have less money for public services because that money doesn't make its way back into the economy. It strengthens criminal activity because, let's face it, the whole point, the whole reason why people would be wanting to flood that money in is, yeah, for some the low taxation helps. As I say, that hurts us because we get less money for public spending. But also because the lower regulations mean not as many questions are asked about where the money came from. So basically you're facilitating criminal activity, you know, money laundering on a grand scale. And a small number of people in this country would benefit, because you might argue, well, why would Boris Johnson want to do it then if no one benefits? Oh, yeah, some people do benefit. A small number of people benefit. And those people are quite happy to throw a few quid into the Tory party coffers. But the rest of us would see nothing. The population at large sees nothing. So would Boris Johnson want to be pushing for something similar to the Singapore trade agreement? You know, well, The thing is, as part of the deal for the real Singapore agreement, is Singapore had to accept EU rules on a lot of areas of bureaucracy, particularly on goods. Singapore exports a lot of goods, and that was the big draw for them to get the trade deal with the EU. Obviously, both sides saw something in it that they wanted, which is why it was agreed. That's the whole point. It's always mutual. Singapore wanted to export a lot of particularly electrical goods to the EU, so they've had to accept rules on, say, safety tests, inspections, labelling, things like that. Now, Boris Johnson keeps talking up the prospect of diverging from the EU on everything. But he's going to have to accept some rules if he wants even the barest of bare bones trade deals. And remember, he keeps saying he wants a comprehensive trade deal. Everyone else has to accept rules. Why would the UK be any different? And the size of our economy also works against us here. The EU have said that the more important the market, the closer the regulatory alignment will have to be. So all those Brexiteers saying just how important the UK market is to the EU are really just justifying the need to accept EU rules. Because two things are absolutely certain. One, the EU is dead against corrupt financial markets. For some time now, the EU has been driving progressive social policies with an expectation that markets are regulated to ensure that ordinary people benefit from the boost to the economy of a nation. This was not always the case and is largely the reason that the right-wing Conservatives fell out of love with Europe. They wanted to join to fatten their wallets, not to help out ordinary people. And the second thing that is certain is the EU will, under no circumstances, sign a deal that makes their own financial sector uncompetitive. They, in the UK-EU negotiations, are the least desperate to get that deal. They would like the deal. It's important to them. It is not more important than preserving the integrity of their own single market. As such, there won't be a trade deal at all unless the UK signs up to a few safeguards. So although I can see Boris Johnson absolutely pushing for what he thinks is a trade deal along the lines of the basis that Singapore has, I think he is probably neglecting to note that there are a lot of aspects to Singapore's economy. You know, it's run a lot more responsibly than Boris Johnson intends to run the UK economy. It had to adopt a lot of EU rules on goods. Its geographic remoteness offers fewer problems in some areas than would be represented by the UK. And because, you know, that's ultimately the problem with Brexit thinking. Even at the top of government, you've got politicians and people alike who see what they want to see in terms of a trade deal between the EU and some other nation, Norway, Canada, Singapore, wherever. They look at some features of it and go, that's good, yeah, that's what we want, we'll have that. And they neglect to see, you know, this sort of, they neglect to see the strings that are attached that had to be agreed. And, you know, they use the word plus as if this hides it all. So they didn't talk about a Norway deal as such, it was Norway plus, Canada plus. I suppose soon it may be Singapore plus. But the plus is really a minus, because what it means is we'll have all these bits in this deal that we like, minus all the things that we don't like. Could we have that, please? What do you mean, no? And that's essentially it. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.